Nyata. Hello. My name's Rueben Berg. I'm a Gunij man, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you here today to this little treaty chat. I am a member of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria from the Metropolitan Region, and I'm joining you here today from the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples. And today I'd like to have a quick little chat about the Treaty Negotiating Framework. So the Treaty Negotiating Framework is one of the key things that we as the First Peoples of Assembly need to be working on under the Advancing the Treaty Process legislation. And within that legislation, it spells out what some of those things we really must be doing as part of that framework. So I thought I'd just talk you through those and then ask some questions because I'd really like to hear feedback from community about some of these things. So if we take a look at the framework itself, within what is dictated to by the legislation, it says there that the treaty negotiation framework must include the following matters: the process for negotiating a treaty or treaties, the process for formalising agreement to a treaty or treaties, minimum standards with which a party must comply in order to enter into treaty negotiations, a schedule setting out the matters, if any, that cannot or must not be agreed to in the course of treaty negotiations, the process for the resolution of disputes arising in the course of treaty negotiations, the mechanisms for enforcing a treaty or treaties, and lastly, reporting requirements in relation to a treaty or treaties. So those are key things that we need to be working on as part of the Assembly. That's what needs to be included as part of that framework. And some of those things we've already had some really strong conversations around and had conversation with community around. And one of those is in terms of who the treaties would be with, and our position as the Assembly is that there should be statewide treaty or treaties and then localised traditional owner-based treaties as well. So those are the two types of treaties we're talking about to include within the framework. And we've also been very clear that from our perspective, everything that's within the responsibility of the state government should be on the table as something that can be part of the discussions, part of the negotiations. Because to me, it's really important to make sure that we're not removing anything from what traditional owners, from what a statewide group might want to negotiate. We're trying to make sure that everything is on the table as a starting point. The one thing in particular, though, that I wanted to ask people's thoughts about today was around the process for negotiating a treaty or treaties. And I'd really like you who are listening here today, if you are an Aboriginal person from here in Victoria, and in particular a traditional owner here in Victoria, if you were to go and sit down with your group to negotiate a treaty, whether that's at a localised traditional owner base or as part of a broader statewide treaty, what are those things that you would really hope were already kind of agreed to by the state about how that would work? You know, how is it ensured that through that process, the Aboriginal people sitting at that table are empowered to set that process for how it's going to work for them? Does that mean that it should be taking place out on country for people? Does that mean that there should be a certain number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who must be in the room as part of that? There are other processes we think are really important to ensure that we can already kind of put in place for this framework so that each group, when they come to sit at the table, aren't having to negotiate those same things. And that's, to me, the value of this framework, is that it kind of just puts in place that baseline for what's already going to be happening so that groups don't have to do that each time. So I'd really love for you to think about, have a chat to your community, have a chat to your family. What are the things you would really like to have already in place to make it easier for you to sit down and negotiate treaties? Because that's going to be the next phase of what happens after we can get this framework put in place. So really love to hear people's thoughts. Feel free to send me an email. Feel free to give me a call. Feel free to reach out any way that you want. I'm more than happy to have a chat. If you want me to have a Zoom just with your family, just with your community group, we'd love to be able to do that as well. So please leave your thoughts below and reach out to me if you'd like to. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll look.